Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Michael, this is going to be an interesting conversation because you said that most sales are spiritual before tactical. How did you come about doing what you do now and coming up with the Cosmic Framework?
Yeah, sure. So I started my company in 2019. Before that, I was a VP of growth, kind of a fancy way of saying I had a sales and marketing at a company that did like outsourced business development. And then so the people we were selling to were mainly sales leaders, marketing leaders, sometimes CEOs of it with smaller companies. And the thing I kept hearing from them was like, I feel sorry for my sales team because I get so much spam in my inbox, right? So they were like, I get 1,000 emails a week and I just delete them, right? And that was 2019. So that was pre-AI, right? That was more like email automation and that stuff. And now you have AI. So if it was 1,000 emails 6 years ago, now it's 3,000 emails, whatever it is. So that's one problem. And I think the other problem with those emails is they're just about what the salesperson wants. They're not about what the buyer wants, right? So that's something we're essentially a sales enablement service company. So a big part is training and coaching. So we train and coach salespeople. How can you think about your buyer, not just yourself, right? So that's where I say it's a spiritual problem because you're not thinking, who's this person? What are they interested in, etc. And then that's more of like an outbound side. If you look at something like let's say a discovery call or a demo call that happens, often I call it like death by PowerPoint, where like I've got my pitch, I'm just going to present it and say any questions at the end, right? Versus making it interactive, thinking, is it even relevant for the other person that you're reaching out to? So yeah, I always say when we start training is everybody hates salespeople. I think in Europe even more. I think in the US sales is respected even more. So there's some of my competitors will say, I'm trying to elevate the profession of sales. For me, that's not my goal. My goal is to train people to be seen more as advisors and not salespeople. And again, that's the spiritual problems, not just on the sales side, it's on the buyer side where they're like, it makes the buyer feel horrible. They're like, oh, it's a pesky salesperson. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of the story behind it.
So something that my mentor says when it comes to training salespeople is like, if you want to train a sales team and you want to get them efficient in the fastest way possible, train them on the person, train them on the ICP, not on your products.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
100% agree. Yeah. So the part I didn't mention, I mentioned the training and coaching services. We also have Playbook services, which is essentially sales content. I think a lot of sales leaders don't focus as much on content as say like content's often seen as a marketing thing. It's like, no, you need content to train your team. And totally our playbooks are exactly what you said. We go as deep as possible into the ideal customer profile and we're not looking at the product, right? Because your buyers don't care about the technical needs of the product. The main thing they're interested in is, does this help me with a business problem I have? If it doesn't, I'm not going to buy your product, right?
Yeah.
And then with the ideal customer profile, one thing I can say is go as deep as possible. So I always give this example of like, let's just say in my industry, I could say I'm going to sell to any head of sales in the world, but say a head of sales at a big consulting company is very different from a head of sales at a software company or different. So we actually try to go as niche as possible. So it's that classic thing. If you try to sell to everyone, you end up selling to no one. Whereas if you try to sell to a select group, you're going to have a lot more success.
So this is the absolute perfect segue. Who is it that you're focusing on, Michael?
Yes, we really have two niches, I would say. One is software, but I think within software, you have a lot of different branches, right? So we have quite a lot of success in fintech. I'm based in London, so there's a lot of fintechs here, cybersecurity. So we've worked a lot across a variety of SaaS companies. And obviously AI is a big thing. So some of our SaaS clients are kind of repositioning themselves as AI. And then another one is corporate real estate. So we work with some Fortune 500 companies in that, such as JLL. And I think that's been more of a recent thing because I think a lot of corporate real estate companies since the pandemic having to sell on Zoom and remotely and use LinkedIn. And they're trying to do a lot of things that SaaS companies have done, even way pre-pandemic, and they're trying to update their sales processes. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of different type of project for us.
So that's a very interesting phenomenon. Like, is that the only thing in common? I mean, I'm asking this because there is a world of difference between a software company and corporate real estate, right? These are not two niches that you would usually associate between each other. So why that choice of like two niches?
Yeah, it's not, I would say it's not something I wasn't one day like, hey, let's target corporate real estate companies. It happened quite organically. So there was a woman called Sonia she used to be a broker. So that's also the thing with corporate real estate. They don't really call themselves salespeople, so they may call them brokers or advisors, a bit like I was saying earlier. And essentially they're representing either the tenant or the landlord of, it could be an office, could be a building, it could be a factory, could be even like retail, like shops on whatever high street where you live.
Yeah.
And she was a broker in the US. She actually listened to me on a podcast, funny enough, like this Sales Hacker podcast, and liked what I was talking about, started following me on LinkedIn. She started getting a lot of results from the tactics that she applied. And then her boss was like, how are you closing all these deals? And she was like, I follow this guy on LinkedIn. You should have a conversation with him. And that's how it started. We started with a small project and then grew it. And I was actually the first Fortune 500 company we worked with, because on the SaaS side, we were working with smaller companies. So it's actually quite a good story about posting on LinkedIn and kind of what it can lead to as well. So yeah, it wasn't something it more chose us. And then it went really well, the project. We got really good results and they gave us a case study. So then we used that to go after other corporate real estate companies as well. But in terms of bringing it back to what's the commonalities and the differences, yeah, obviously it's a totally different thing they're selling. But I think with us, a lot of what we're preaching about doing deep research on your customers and multi-threading, which I know is something you want to talk about later. I think often like corporate real estate deals are more like, it's almost more like an enterprise type sell with like very long sales cycles. And we had a lot of experience of that from the SaaS world. So with SaaS, if it's a very transactional, say less than like 3K a year deal, we're not really a good fit for those types of companies because like what we're teaching is really very transactional selling.
Okay, so there are so many things I want to double down on here because there is a lot of golden nuggets. So to the question of like, how did you end up servicing corporate real estate? The answer is content. Tell me more about that. Like, how do you do content? How do you position it in a way that you get found by the right people? Or turns out by people you didn't even intend on reaching in the first place, who implement your tactics, get results, and then their boss. Like, this is such a long thread here. So tell me more about your marketing mix and how you come up with content.
Yeah, so something to know about me is I actually worked in marketing before I worked in sales. I was a marketing manager before I was an account manager, which was like my first sales job. And then when I got into sales leadership, my old company, I was actually a marketing manager, then a salesperson, then like a head of sales and marketing. So I've always seen sales and marketing very interconnected. And I think content is not just for, I'm going to post on LinkedIn or etc. But if you've got someone in a sales cycle, there's that stat that HubSpot always talk about, which is 70% of the buyer cycle is done when the salesperson's not in the room. So before they even reach your website, they've done 70% of their research. So as a salesperson, if you contact them before that, you've got to be providing them the right content, which is often education. It's not, hey, this is our product and it's great. So anyway, I've always known that with my marketing hat. And because of that, I made the decision at my last company. So we're probably talking 2017 here. I was like, okay, I'm going to start regularly posting on LinkedIn. I think I set a goal of doing one a week. My posts at the start were terrible, but like anything, the more you do it, you learn. And then I started getting decent success and then kind of up the velocity. And now I try to post at least every weekday. And in terms of what I try to post, it's a lot of just learning always sharing what I've learned as I've gone along on my journey. So before it was kind of sales and marketing advice at my last company. So I joined about employee 10, we grew it to 200 people. So what I was learning along the way, what was working, what wasn't working. And now obviously it's slightly different that we're doing training and, I always say CEO in inverted commas because when you're a CEO of a small company, you're doing I'm a head of marketing as an example because we don't have a marketing person. But I'm kind of talking about that journey as a small business owner. So I think the problem with content is, and most of our clients, even like these enterprise companies we're working now, it's very vanilla, it's very like corporate, and people just want to hear about like stories and lessons learned, and that's the stuff that helps. And I think that was the content that appealed to this girl Sonia who was at JLR.
So it's so interesting because I think sales. So I try to learn a lot about sales as well. And I think sales, especially in the education space, in the content space, is super, super. I don't like the term saturated because I think there is always room for an added personality to an existing playbook. And at the end of the day, people will relate to you. Likeness is also very important when you do content. But I think this is something that a lot of B2B coaches and consultants are facing, is that they wake up, it's 2025, they've never put content out there. They arrive in their space and they realize that actually there are a lot of people who are doing lots of stuff with certain amount of results. So I want to go down that rabbit hole because you're doing it successfully. How do you come up with the content that you now publish on LinkedIn and other platforms? Like what's the thing that prompts what you're going to talk about and how?
So I would start having a system where it could be, we use like the Google Suite. So I use a Google Doc, could be a Word doc, it could be like notes on your iPhone. And every time you have an idea, you just like write it down. And the main thing is just like, okay, have I gone through an experience that someone else could learn about, right? Because again, that's what a lot of people do on LinkedIn. It's like, hey, I'm at an event. Hey, we won this award. Hey, we did. It's just like boasting that has absolutely no value for your audience. So if you're doing something that someone else can learn from, like write a post about it. Obviously, the first step is remembering, because sometimes literally I'll be like walking in Hyde Park in London and I'll be like, oh, that thing I learned this week is probably something other people could learn about. Write it down. And then, next week when I'm at my desk and I've got also have notes in your calendar, like I've got a thing 1:30 p.m. like to do a LinkedIn post, right? So if you can block out a bit of time in your diary to do that, or you can do it on the weekend. I've started front loading posts, so like on a Saturday or Sunday, or like write posts, and then sometimes I'll just get inspiration and I'll do it at the time. But yeah, I think the main thing is like, I wouldn't even say, am I going through someone else can learn something that someone else can learn from? Because I think every single person goes through an experience that someone else can learn from. But identifying what those are, that's a super important thing. And the last bit of advice I would give here is actually if you can share your failures as well, because that's like, you can even frame that as not failures, but lessons learned. That's going to be really key as well, because that will make you authentic. And now with AI and social media, there's so many like snake oil people out there just selling lies. So like, if you share your lessons learned, it shows you're like really authentic as well.
Okay, that's the last thing I will mention, because I want to ask you so many other things, especially around sales, Michael. But like, this is gold. In 2025, heading into 2026, anybody can claim anything on the internet. Like, it's so easy. Everybody is an expert in their niche thanks to ChatGPT on LinkedIn now.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is the reason why we decided to take this podcast fully live, is authenticity and being true, showing the mistakes, showing the things that you're not getting right from the get-go, not being the superhero that knows everything and does everything, is super important to build trust. And that's also how people relate, right? And I'm sure we're going to get to it a little bit later on when we talk about sales, but you're buying from people until AI knows exactly how to replicate face and body language whatsoever. But so important here. I like it a lot. Anything else you're doing apart from LinkedIn, going on other people's podcasts? This is how you got that corporate deal. I mean, that Fortune 500 deal. Anything else in marketing?
Yeah, so with LinkedIn, I think it's quite common knowledge now that the overall organic reach is down. And by organic reach, I mean, unless you do like paid advertising, right, which I've never done on LinkedIn, the number of impressions you're getting is less than it was a few years ago. I still post on LinkedIn. It's where my buyers are. There's still a lot of posts I have that get really good traction. But I noticed that trend was the impressions were going down. So I was like, okay, I can't rely on LinkedIn when I don't own the audience, right? I just reached 40,000 followers, but I have some posts that have 500 views. I have others that have hundreds of thousands of views. I can't really control who sees it and who doesn't. So I decided to start a newsletter. That was probably about 18 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. And then that's been really useful as well. And actually the two combine quite nicely because I do get inbound leads sometimes. I'm like, how did you hear about us? And they're like, oh, I get your emails. And then I'm also following your content on LinkedIn. So that's been really useful as well. Just trying to think of anything else. We have partnerships as well. So when you're doing partnerships, think, okay, what other companies have a similar target audience to you? So we partner with a lot of sales software, whether it's like call recording tools or there's companies where you can get data, like phone numbers, emails, etc., and they're selling to salespeople as well. So we have partnerships, and they're kind of mutual partnerships where sometimes I have a company that's looking for their software, and sometimes they're like, okay, the sales team is going to get the software, but they don't know how to use it, and that's where we come in. So I would say partnerships, social media, email newsletter, and then I don't know if you would call this marketing or sales. I also have a full-time SDR I work with called Lawrence, and I think that's really important because we train SDRs. So I'm always getting him to test new stuff because I think otherwise we're kind of training a group of people and we're not up to date in terms of like what's working best for them.
Walk the talk.
Exactly.
Put your money where your mouth is. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So I would love to spend like ages on marketing, but I have a few other questions that I think you're going to be quite a fit to answer to, Michael.
Sure.
So B2B coaches and consultants, they're usually very good at their craft. They're experts. That's why they are getting paid so much per hour to consult and to coach. Now, the thing that I think 90% of B2B coaches and maybe 95% of B2B coaches and consultants hate selling. So for multiple reasons, right? It's not comfortable, feels pushy sometimes. I think something that you talk a lot about is multi-threaded deals, right? When you have a consulting practice, a coaching practice, when you're about to give a coaching session, speaking event to like 20, 30, 50, 100 with breakout sessions and so on, things can get lost throughout the sales journey. So let's start with you maybe. How do you do sales? How do you go from that initial interest on LinkedIn, newsletter, some people start getting results from your content and are like, maybe I should hire him. How do you go from that to an actual conversation, closing conversation, SOW, letter of engagement, we rock and roll? How does all that happen?
Yeah, so normally the first process is to qualify the person that comes in, because I think a lot of probably people are working with people who can't afford this, or putting someone in a sales cycle who can't afford their service. So like give them a quick call on their phone first, make sure they're a good fit. If they're not, I don't just say, hey, you're not a good fit. I try to there's other sales coaches who kind of work for lower fees than us. So often we'll try to refer them. But then if they are a good fit, then I basically book a 30-minute call. In that 30-minute call, normally how I run that is probably it's about 15 minutes learning about them, 15 minutes, or I'd say 10 minutes about us, and then 5 minutes next steps. Now, in that 15 minutes, you're trying to, it's a classic thing. They call it a discovery. But I think what you shouldn't do in discovery is just like pepper people with questions. It's like very scripted, right? For example, I think you're doing a great job on this podcast because you're like listening to what I'm saying and then you're asking a question. You're not like, I've got this list of 10 questions, I'm just going to ask that and that's it, right? Which has happened on other podcasts I've been to. And sales is like a discovery session, is the same as doing a podcast. You ask questions, you listen, you follow up. 100%. And you need a bit of a system. For me, I'm looking like, what's the goal they're trying to achieve? What's stopping them from reaching that goal, which is the challenge? And then what's their current situation? Now, the other thing to say is like discovery is a continuous process. So just because I do it on the first call doesn't mean the discovery is ended. So if I've worked out on that call that there's a good fit and I want to have a second call, on the second call, I'm like, okay, on the last call, we talked about this goal, this challenge. I want to go more specific. I want to see how can we measure that, right? What are some numbers around it, etc. So that's a discovery piece. That's a good thing. Discovery is always a continuous process. And in terms of the value proposition, which is, okay, how can you help the other person? Of course, you've got to tie it to the discovery. And then I think if you can show versus tell, because I think with the audience here, like consultants, you don't have a software or a tech, but there may be certain things you can do. So one of the things we talk about now is use AI for salespeople should use AI as an assistant for research, not replacing what they do. So how that looks is I could send you I could write I could say, hey, I want to target this company and I want to write them an email selling sales training. ChatGPT, can you do it? It's going to write a load of rubbish. But what I could do is tell me more about the Consulting Leaders podcast. Tell me who's been on it. Tell me what channels are on, etc. And then if I was to approach you, I got that research. I saw you did a great job as well before this, doing notes on me and the research you've done on me. So anyway, going back to the value proposition piece, I basically say, even if they come inbound, I would say, look, if I was targeting you outbound and we didn't have a relationship, this is the process I would use. This is the research I've done. This is a problem you may have. And this is a customer where we've helped them solve that problem. And then be like, what do you think of this approach? And that's also, I think, important is sometimes people they never ask the question of are you interested in what I'm showing you? Because if they say, no, I don't think this is a good fit for us, that's easy. Disqualify, right? Even if it's a big company, sometimes they don't have the need.
Yeah.
And then if they do, then you get into what I would call more process questions, which is going to multi-threading. Who else would need to be involved from your side? Should we involve marketing in our case? If you're selling IT or something, it could be, should we involve cybersecurity, whatever it is? What's your timeline for this, etc. So, but I think those process questions always have to come at the end. If you start with that, then you come off as very transactional.
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah, hopefully that helps.
It does a lot, and I think something I would just add here, and it's looping in something that you've said earlier around being crystal clear on your ICP and who you're helping. I think if you want to build the right sales playbook and have the right sales motion, you need to know almost better than the person you're talking to the pain points they are going through right now, their desired outcome, and their objectives. I mean, I'm going to assume as a salesperson who's looking for coaching, or a sales manager, VP of sales who's looking to coach their team, it's always pretty straightforward. It's how do we close better? How do we close faster? How do we close higher revenue? That's pretty much it. But then everything is downstream for that. Why is that not happening? How can we do better? What have you tried before? I'm taking the example of sales because this is what you do. Any B2B coach or consultant listening to us, and I hear that so many times, if you're not crystal clear on your ICP, and it's not just, business founders or Fortune 500, it's a role, a timeline in their journey, maybe a recent promotion, an industry, a company size, a specific service. And if you can go very, very narrow, the same problems come back all the time, which allows you to have the right playbook. How do you help teams keep momentum, Michael? That's something I'd like to dig into, because long sales cycles, right? This is what we have to face in B2B coaching and consulting. I'm sure when you discuss with corporates, Fortune 500 corporate real estate companies, it's not done overnight. So how do you maintain momentum throughout the whole sales cycle?
Yeah, I think is having urgency yourself, not creating urgency for the buyer. So that's one of the mistakes salespeople make. There's a quote. It's funny. It's Alcoholics Anonymous, but I think it's a great life lesson generally in sales as well, which is Lord, grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So anyway, it's working out what's in your control and what's in the buyer's control. The decision is always in the buyer's control, right? But there's a lot of things that are in your control. So I'll give you an example from this week, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think this is where one of the ways I think say to our two niches, I think corporate real estate leaders actually do this better than SaaS salespeople, which is like, I'm just going to give this person a call, and it's not like a cold call, right? I think in business now, the whole SaaS sales process is like, we're going to have a discovery call, then we're going to have a demo call, then we're going to invite stakeholders, it's like a very linear process. But as you know, like sales never works like that. Every client is totally different. So anyway, I'm working on a deal at the moment. It's actually a company we did a project with for about a year. Finished about 6 months ago. They went through a merger and acquisition, and I've been working on trying to work with them again. Now they've the merger and acquisition has like gone through. And anyway, I know the CRO pretty well because we worked with him before, and he said to me, look, like, I'm interested, but I want you to like work on the details with this sales manager in the UK and sales manager in the US. Anyway, I had a call with the sales manager in the UK. He's a big advocate of us. The sales manager in the US is a little bit more skeptical. Now, I have a call with the CRO. The CRO is Chief Revenue Officer, that terminology for anyone listening. But I have a meeting with him, and also his head of HR, because he wants the budget to come from HR, on Tuesday next week in London. Now, I could have been like, I'm going to wait until that meeting, because it's in person, to update them on what's happened. Now, in terms of your question about momentum, I thought, no, I want to update him beforehand so that he's got context, right? And also I've got context about his feedback going into that meeting. So I gave him a call. He actually didn't answer. He just sent me a message saying, sorry, I'm busy at the moment, right? Now, again, that could have just been like, hey, I'm going to wait to the meeting. But I just sent him a text and I just said, hey, I had a conversation with the sales manager. I just wanted to update you on that, right? Anyway, he gives me a call back 3:30. And he actually said to me, he's like, do you know what? I'm going through like budgeting today. I know we're not going to have like the full proposal, but I would love like just some rough numbers, right? So anyway, he's now put that in yesterday, and that could be like a make or break thing. And then we've got the call next week to discuss numbers, right? And maybe I don't know exactly what's happening there. Again, the things outside of my control, but maybe if he hadn't put in this budget line, this project could have got delayed by like 6 months. So that's just an example of like, momentum is, don't just always wait for that next Zoom call or whatever. Even if you've got it in the diary, just pick up your phone and like have a conversation with your buyer.
Oh, you're giving me too much to follow up on, Michael, which I love, but you're not making my job easier. So a few things I want to double down on. People love to buy, they hate to be sold. I think this is something that we tend to forget. I like so I understand. And there are lots of training that go that way, by the way, creating urgency within the prospects to get them to take action because we want to close the deal. And I think when relevant and when the solution could genuinely help them, and the longer they wait, the worse the problem gets, it's interesting to at least probe, at least ask those questions. Now, tell me more about what you mentioned around creating urgency for yourself, for the salesperson or the B2B coach or consultant, selling the services. How do you do that? Is it with like time limited discounts? Is it with specific how do you do that?
No, because I think the discounts would be more, that's really almost like trying to manipulate the buyer. This is more of just like looking at yourself and being like, okay, what can I do in this moment? So in that moment, I could be like, okay, I've got this call next week. I'm going to wait for that. But that's not me. It's all about action. So it's like, what action can I specifically take right now? There's that book, Atomic Habits by James Clear that people may have read listening to this. And that's all about the like small habits that lead to the big thing. So I'm talking about these small habits that lead to a big deal getting closed, which is like, okay, what I can do, I can call the CRO right now. Okay, what am I going to talk about with this CRO? What question? Okay, I've just had this conversation. Let me get my feedback on if he thinks what I discussed with Joe is relevant. So you're keeping momentum. Another thing you can do I haven't mentioned is, say he didn't call me back, say I can't get hold of him. Okay, what could I do? I could send him an email just saying, hey, this is what I spoke about with Joe. The other thing I could do, I could add value through content, right? So one of the things we do is we record most of our training sessions. And I can also say, hey, by the way, so this is another deal I'm working. They've never worked with us before. This is a new logo. And I sent them a 5-minute recording saying, hey, this is an example of like I think the deals with BDR. So it's like, this is a BDR training. And that's interesting. That's good to know, right? So always think like, what's the action I can take right in this moment? And again, someone would give the excuse, oh, they didn't answer the phone, they didn't text me. Okay, send them an email that's like giving value, offering some piece of content that's actually providing value to them.
I like that a lot. I usually ask the question around how do you retain on this podcast, but I'm going to tweak it a bit just for you, Michael.
Okay.
How do you, especially in long sales cycles, especially with the type of deals that you're dealing with right now and the type of deals you help your clients with, how do you upsell, cross-sell without feeling too salesy or too pushy? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that there's two ways to do this. There's more of like a cold play, which is, you would think, how could you do cold upsell? But if you're working with a big enterprise, as an example, and they've got offices all over the world, the office in the US or Canada often has never spoken to people in the UK, right? So it's almost like we've actually got a few campaigns we're working with like that at the moment. It's almost like doing cold outreach. But what's not cold about it is, let's just say you're trying to go from the US to the UK, because that's actually something we're working on at the moment. I have a story with that specific logo of how we've helped those people in the US that I can use with the UK, so I could reach out to people there. Now, what you first need to do is discovery with the person you're currently working with, which in sales terminology they call the champion, right? And saying, hey, do you know anyone in the UK? And they may be like, no. If they say yes, then you'd be like, what can you tell me about them, etc. Like, I feel like what we're doing with you could be relevant to them. What do you think? Would you be happy to make an intro? So that would be more of like a warm approach. Now, the cold approach is sometimes they're just going to say, no, we don't speak with anyone there. And then it's almost just doing like a classic like business development play where you're going to call them, send them a LinkedIn message, email, and just say, hey, we worked with your colleague in the US. I know things are separate, so you probably don't know them. This was the problem they had. Thought it may be a problem for you. This is how we help them with it. Like, would you be open to learning more? Right. So that's those are really the two approaches we look at in terms of like upsell, cross-sell.
I like that. And I think that also comes back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, which were the referral partners, the partnerships. Anyone can be a referral partner. Anybody you have an interaction with, even if they don't end up in a sale, could know someone who is in need for it. I very much like your approach here because it's much more tailored to like, what can you tell me about them first? And like, would this be relevant instead of, hey, do you know somebody I can sell my services to? And of course, I would recommend any B2B coach or consultant listening to us right now to approach their own clients and discuss, hey, if they're happy, right? Don't do that if they're unhappy or wait until they are happy. But like every client can become a source of referral. You need to incentivize them properly. Money is not always the perfect way to do it, by the way. It very much depends on the situation. But like having that conversation to have referrals, reoccurring revenue is a very good way to do it as well. Curveball for you, Michael. Where would you say your biggest challenge is right now? Like, what are you looking forward to work on so that, it unlocks the next level of growth? I'm going to assume it's not sales. But in your case, what's that one thing that you're working on right now to take your whole business to the next level?
Well, I guess it's almost our product and service and more of like the renewals piece and recurring revenue, like you were talking about. So I think nature of any service business in my old company was the same, where I wasn't doing training, but we were essentially providing almost outsourced BDRs to people. It's not as sticky as, say, like a CRM. Like once you're in Salesforce, it's quite difficult to get rid of it because you've got all your data and stuff on there.
Very good retention.
Retention. We often have clients who we do an amazing job with. We work with them whether it's 6 months or 3 years, and they say, hey, sales is going great now. Our sales team are doing awesome. We don't need you anymore. So that's always a problem with the service business. And one of the things I'm doing at the moment, we've written all the content. So there's going to be 10 videos, 10 modules, and then tests you do within that is a course, like an online course. And there'll be two aspects to that. At the moment, we don't do any individual sales coaching. So this will be, I get people that contact me online that I normally refer to someone else saying, hey, do you have a course? Do you have like one-on-ones you can do? So that's a new kind of revenue stream that will open up. And then also there'll be like a at the moment, because we're a service business, it requires a human for any type of sales training or enablement we do. Whereas this would just be like you'll be able to log in and do like a self-serve course. So that's a big thing I'm working on at the moment. We're starting with a business development course of how do you build pipeline, and then based on the success of that, we're going to do one around discovery, closing, and negotiation, upsells, cross sells, like you're talking about, even train the trainer. So yeah, that's a big thing I'm working on at the moment, which is how can we have a product that doesn't, involve humans that could be a little bit stickier.
That would make a lot of sense. Michael Hanson, ladies and gentlemen. Michael, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, follow your content, where should they go?
Yes, if you type Michael Hanson Growth Genie into LinkedIn, it'll come up, as we've been talking about here. I'm very active there. And then you're also welcome to email me. It's mhanson@growthgenie.co.
We'll put all the links in the description. One thing I can say for sure, Michael, is that you've gained at least one new LinkedIn connection out of this interview. Me, I just added you. Michael, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.